Welcome to the Helix webinar series. Today's session is on leveraging synthetic monitoring for AIOps. For those that don't already know, that I think this is around number 14 you're on. We've done multiple sessions over the last year or so. We're joined again, and he's a frequent co-host with us, Mike Yates, who will do his formal introduction shortly. But both myself and Yaron co-host these sessions once a month. So today we will be focusing on synthetic monitoring. But before I hand over to Mike to get us started, just a couple of reminders, and especially for those that are new. The Q&A section you will find at the bottom of your computer. If you do have any questions during the session, please put the questions into the Q&A, not the chat, and we will have roughly 15 to 20 minutes at the end where we will take your questions live. Obviously, that's all dependent on how much Mike's going to do some talking today. So, Mike, I'm going to hand over to you to get us started.
So no pressure then. Okay. So very quickly, I'm Mike Yates. I see some names on the list that I know, so apologies to them straight away. For everybody else who doesn't know me, I am just over 30 years at BMC. I am 46 years in operations. And from a BMC perspective, I'm one of the guys that makes all of our AIOps Helix operations work. I'm also, ask me a direct question, I'll give you a direct answer kind of guy. That's me. And even though I have a strange English accent, I'm not based in England like Sam. I am in sunny Orlando, Florida. That's me. Right. For the presentation, I'm actually going to turn video off because you don't want to see me bending over and looking at my other screens. So turn video off. Make sure everybody can see synthetic monitoring for AIOps. This is the conversation for today. So if I move forward, there you go. Yeah. So agenda-wise, it's kind of very loose. We're going to say, what are BMC synthetic transactions? What do they do for you? Who benefits from these transactions? Then I'm going to give you a few examples of how to install, and I'm going to use Playwright, but we also support Selenium, but I'll do that in a minute. And then I'm going to talk about some of the extensions that you can do with synthetic transactions. So moving right along, what are synthetic transactions? Okay, so my way of describing it, if I was starting a brand new data center tomorrow, I had no monitoring, no nothing, and I had a bunch of applications, the first thing I would use is synthetic transactions. It gives me a warm, fuzzy feeling that my application is working or not. The BMC synthetic transactions, we can record transactions using Playwright, which I'm going to talk mostly about today, or we can take Selenium scripts. So basically you record a transaction, whether it's Playwright or Selenium, and you replay that through a Helix monitor, or for older folks on the call, a patrol agent or patrol agents somewhere around your environment. It is used to record synthetic transactions against web-enabled applications. I've had multiple customers who will actually use synthetic transactions for monitoring their primary competitors. It gives you an idea when one of your competitors might be struggling, which means hopefully you'll get more business. So don't think of just internal applications. You can really monitor any transactions, any synthetics you want. I'd like to say it's not going to be competing with the full APM solutions like Dynatrace or AppD. This is a very simple way of understanding if the application is working. We're not going to go into deep diagnostics on the application. You can obviously set up custom timers. So you record a script, you might want to know the login time, you might want to know the database time, you might want to know how long it takes in the mid-tier. So yes, the custom timers can be extremely useful, especially when you start generating events against those synthetic transactions. And the way that the KM or the knowledge module, and hopefully everybody on the call at least knows what a BMC Helix monitor or patrol agent actually is. If not, question and answer, and I can cover that later on. but I can create a script on my laptop and then use that script in 2, 5, 50 different patrol agents from the Helix GUI. So that's really what synthetic transactions are for. When you start looking at AIOps, obviously those synthetic transactions can be put against your applications, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. Then, who benefits from it? And it's kind of fairly simple. Obviously, Helix Operations benefits from it. Even if I don't have business services, I haven't defined a business service, I can generate events into the BHOM console against those synthetic transactions. It could be on one of the particular custom timers, it could be on the whole script, or you can do things like anomaly detection against the actual total transaction time. And again, it's something within Helix anomaly detection out the box. If the transactions start to slow down, I would generate an alarm, and I'm actually going to show that in a little while. Application support. This is where we start tying those synthetic transactions to our business services. Or it could be the SRE team using dashboards just to look at all the synthetic transactions that you're running. So there's lots of different folks who will be getting great information out of these synthetic transactions. Now, how easy is it to get all this to work? So if I go to the next slide, I'm actually going to use one of my own examples that I did last week. This was on a POV with one of my customers. We basically went from 0 to events being generated in about 15 minutes. Obviously, I already had an agent running in the environment. I literally had to install Java, both on the agent and wherever you were recording the script from. I had to install Python because all these scripts end up being Python scripts, and then run a few simple commands like pip install, playwright, etc. And then run a playwright install, which will install the browsers. That can be done on your agent or on your laptop. I'm not going to go through every slide on this. These slides are really to be used later on, because when we start looking at some of the scripting, I am not going to describe every single line of code. But this is some things I've seen over the time where I try and run a synthetic transaction and I have a failure. It's normally where either the browsers haven't been installed properly, or they've gone into the wrong place. And there's various things out there. And again, I'm concentrating on Playwright. The main reason why I use Playwright rather than Selenium, it allows for synchronous and asynchronous transactions. I don't have to edit the Python script once I've recorded it in Playwright, whereas if I've got a Selenium script, I have to do a couple of little edits to that script before you can push it out to a patrol agent. And then, as I said, there could be times when you try and run this Playwright install that it doesn't install the browsers. I've had that issue actually internally within the BMC network because it wouldn't let me get to the URLs, and I could actually run this dry run to see where the scripts are actually, which HTTP address the browsers are at, and I can go and get those. Then, once you've installed Python, you've installed Java, and you've got Playwright installed and ready to go, it's as simple as running Playwright CodeGen, and I'm going to show this in a couple of seconds in a brief demo. So on my laptop, I record the script on my laptop. I can edit that script afterwards. I have found a really useful facility. Somebody might have heard of Google. It's a new internet thing, but there are so many examples through Google on Playwright and how you can edit scripts. I've tried to show some of that later on of where I've been updating scripts. But yes, it's as simple as once I've installed Playwright, you literally run the install, and then you're set and ready to go to create scripts. So In the case of here, we've got Playwright. I've installed Playwright, and in normal fashion, if I bring this over here and I do wherever it is, here you go. This is how simple it is to run and record scripts. Again, I'm using Playwright. I've installed Playwright. It's on my laptop. I basically do Playwright, CodeGen, whatever the URL is you want to go to. And in this case, I've got -o, which is actually creating an output file automatically for me. And I hit return. And eventually on my other screen, which is always really annoying, it brings me up my recorder. If you notice over here, under the target, I will use library as the type of Python script. You could be using asynchronous, but I'm generally going to use library. But if you notice, it's already building the script for me. I don't need to do anything. Up here, I can start going, well, I just want to do some text verification. Yes, and if you notice, the script gets updated. And eventually, I could drill through different screens and everything else, end the recording, and say, yep, I'm good. Close that down, and I've got my script. If I then go, well, actually, I've probably got it here. So I've recorded my script because I have Python in here. I can run my Python docs_bmc.python, and it'll show me if my script actually works. So I can do as much testing as I want, verifying. All I'm going to do is make sure that the script that I have generated is actually going to run. I can go and edit that script. It's an open text file, and I can add different steps to it if I want, and I'll show some of the things I do later on from there. There is another thing that is super cool in Playwright, and it's, again, something I've got described later on, but you can also do tracing on these scripts. So stepping about 10 slides in front, I have updated a script to do tracing. If the script works successfully, I won't create the trace file. If the script fails, and on one of my last screens, there's actually a zip file of an example script that basically does all that for you. But I can do tracing. And what tracing allows me to do is, just like it says, I create a trace file. I actually generate a bhom event to show me where that trace file is. And as I say, it'll trace you through the script. So if there's a script failure or anything else, I can come in here and actually look, what did the script do? How long did each piece take? I don't expect anybody to create a trace file for every single transaction. I just want to do it for failed transactions. But anytime you want to do it, the code later on in the day is there for you to look at. So very simply, I have created a Python script. I have done whatever I need to do, text verification, clicking around the screen to get to my different screens, making sure that things go on. As we all know, you might have user IDs, passwords. I'll talk about those in a while, bringing in synthetic or bringing in variables into your scripts. But a simple script, like I said right at the beginning, I just want to know if our application is working to start with. I might have 3 screens that I go through, create a very simple Python script, which I can ingest directly into bhom. I don't need to do anything with this script at all. So let me get rid of this one and move this out the way again. So if you notice from here, yes, we've got the recorder. You can stop recording. You can add text verification. You can add labels. You can look for certain bits of text. There are ways you can extend the Playwright script to actually trap some of that data and send it into bhom as a metric, for instance. You could do that. But where do we go from there? So in this instance, I now have my script. How do we deploy this to my agent? So hopefully people on the call at least understand some of the BHOM environment, what we need to do with it. But if I come down to here, so I'm in Helix. I go to operations management. I go to configuration. I go to monitor policies. And I'm going to look for my synthetic policy. Just the same as any other monitoring in BMC, we've defined a monitoring policy. I have pushed the knowledge module for synthetic transaction out to one or multiple agents. I come in, do an edit, and I'm going to go and edit my synthetic monitoring. Notice synthetic monitoring, application configuration. I am configuring my application. I've created, in this case, a synthetic transaction. This is the script path that will be used out on the agents when I push this script out. If there's any script variables, so in my final example, again, when you get the slides, there's a zip file of the whole Python script that I wrote, but I am passing variables through. So if I look at user ID and no, before anybody asks, that's not my real user ID, I have enabled encryption of some of the variables going through to the script. Again, that is covered a little bit later. These are variables to this particular script. You can also have global variables. So global script variables, again, using a secret key. And again, this is all described later on, but you can create global variables for every script within that environment. You can create local variables for individual scripts. What's actually kind of funny, and even I took a little while to notice this, when you use a secret variable, when you type it in, you'll see a bunch of dots, just like any other encryption. If I'm using script variables that aren't secret variables, you will see the raw text. So if I go and edit this one, there's my raw text of, in my case, my Helix URL. That is being used in the final script that is actually sending events directly to BHOM, not necessarily going through the metrics from my script as well. But anyway, once you've done that and you've saved your script, it's going to say, do you want to pick the file that you are going to actually use in your knowledge module sent out to the patrol agents for them to run around the environment? In this case, I have configured the actual location of the script, in this case, which was on my laptop. I am saying, where is it going to go to? And in this case, you would say, I want it to go to this directory, whatever that directory is. It might be a C drive. You could pick whatever you want. And this is the script that's actually going to run. If I then do save, that is going to deploy that script to all the connected agents that are defined to run that KM. In my case, it's just one host, funny enough, called MWW Mic 2, that is running all my synthetic transactions. This could be, I might use tags of synthetics. I might use different ways of doing it, just like any other configuration within BHOM. That's as simple as it is. I've installed Python, I've installed Java on my laptop. I have done that on the agents themselves. I have deployed the synthetic monitoring KM knowledge module to those machines, and we are good to go. From there, I can view the metrics in BHOM. I could view any events, but can I extend that script to make it do other things? And again, this is just configuring where we need to go. How do I extend it? And I will put a
Mike,
caveat in. Yep.
Sorry to stop you. Well, we do have a couple questions in our Q&A, and before we move on, maybe we can answer these. So, so you mentioned Chrome as one of the browsers supported by Playwright. So our friend Anupam, hi Anupam, is asking what other browsers are supported by Playwright.
So Playwright supports multiple browsers. It could be Firefox, it could be Chrome, it can actually now be Edge as well. So there are different browsers that are supported. Um, and if I went back to one of the original screens, so hold on, previous. So in here, you've got Chrome, you've got what's this? Chromium Headless, Firefox, WebKit, WinLDD, but they also now support Edge as well. So Edge is also a supported browser. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, I think it does. And
Oh, yeah,
there is one more question for URL checks. Do I need to have a separate script for every URL, or can I just have kind of a default script and just change the URL?
The answer to that is yes and yes. And I'll explain why. So sorry, I've got somebody at my front door. In a single script, where you start recording that script, you can go to any URL. What I would actually do is I will put custom timers in. So I would go to docs.bmc.com. I would start a custom timer called docs.bmc.com, and I would end that custom timer called docs.bmc.com. Then I would go to www.f1.com. I would start a timer called Formula One, and I would end a timer called Formula One. So I can put whatever you want in that script. If it is just doing purely URL checking, can I just get to that URL? The scripting KM does support URLs as well. But if you want to do it in a single script, no, just record a script that goes to 15 or 20 different URLs and use that as one script. So the answer to that is yes, I can do that very easily. Hopefully that answered that question too.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
You are welcome. Thank you for the interruption. I wasn't looking at Q&A. Bad Michael. All right.
That's my job.
And you do it so well. These next pages are I think I'll define it as quite an eyeful. I am, again, not going to describe every single one. All I'm trying to do is expand people's idea of what you can do with the scripting language. So very simply, just like you saw me do earlier on, I can just record a straight script. I can do a bit of text verification. I might want to do, hey, let's check the title. Let's check some data within the script. That's the first piece. Again, these slides from here for a few are for you to have a look at afterwards, not necessarily for me to talk about how useless I am at picking colors. And I will confess, the reason why the colors were here, I created a document internally for some of our BMC folks to look at how to use scripts. And being a lazy person that I am, sometimes I copied them into here. So then you've got things like, I want to add log information. We talked about script variables. You can add the log information into here. As we all know, I probably don't want to hard code a user ID and password in a script, but it might be something simple. You just want it to run. Security wise, if that script's going to be out in patrol, make sure that nobody else on that system can look at the script. Or you want to start adding timers to the script. It's as simple as adding one line to the script that you recorded first, which is that timer equals STM timer, and this import the STM timer here. And then it's as simple as timer start, timer stop, And you can, just like the question with the multiple URLs, that's exactly how I would do it here. I would have a timer for each URL. Really cool feature. Obviously, when you start looking at the metrics in BHOM, every one of those timer sections will also have their own metric. So for your situation, again, where you got the multiple URLs, you could set different values based on the environment. Or if you are doing anomaly detection against each one of the timer sections, that means you don't have to specify anything. You just let the BHOM AIOps anomaly detection turn that on and you're good. When you start using encryption, so I want to turn encryption on and turn encryption off, which is why when you looked at my global variables, it was a string of complete gobbledygook. That is because I have encrypted the data when I'm running. So when I want to do my scripts, I am encrypting the data, including encrypted variables. Again, I have encrypted my data. There's basically a encryption code that you'll put in, and the encryption or the raw data, which will encrypt it for you. That is what you'll put in your global variable. As I've just mentioned, if somebody is going to be clever enough to turn on tracing or look at the script, those might be put in there as a global variable. So like this, I could print my unencrypted password if you are able to edit the code. Down to security, make sure that somebody doesn't have access to those scripts. As I showed you in the actual configuration of the knowledge module in the monitoring policy, you've got global variables, you've got global secret variables. Only difference is when I actually add the variable in the monitoring policy, when I'm typing it, it will be a series of dots for the secret. If I'm typing it into the standard one, it's just going to be raw text. And every single script can have override parameters or their own variables as well. But it's a really cool way of actually using that data, and you could actually do a variable when you've got the script running. It can start looking at different OS information on the target device and use that information as well. So it doesn't have to be passed from BMC. I can actually use Playwright to interrogate the target server and get additional information. So don't think of it as just passing variables in from the monitoring policy. The script can actually be used to read system variables as well. So you could pass that as a variable in the script. Anyway, another thing that I found really useful, if you are never going to in the same script and you need to carry over a session ID or header ID from one to another, correlation A, yes, it is, and I'll talk about that in a second. Sorry, I was just looking at the open question. We'll talk about that in a second. Another thing that I found really useful when I started to use scripting KM and extend it is just putting entries in to look for particular return codes. So in this case, I'm looking for, if the response is 200, it's all good, I'm great. If not, I want to start turning on tracing, which is, like I said before, I want to do, or send an alert to BHOM or do whatever you need to do. I can build that into the script. So in this case, I have run a piece of script, return code not 200. I might turn on tracing and then be able to look at the trace file, which will be stored on the local patrol stroke Helix monitor agent. That's not going to be shipped up unless you really wanted to put something in the code that you could copy that file to a central repository if you wanted to. But that's, again, within the Playwright script, you can issue OS commands as well if you need to. Love tracing. Talked about that and showed you tracing before. it does give me the ability, if something fails, which is why I was looking for return code 200 being good, anything else, create that. Tracing allows me to look exactly what that script did, how long each section took, the pages that are there, etc. So that's another thing that can be really useful. And then the last one, and the code was too long for this, I took everything as far as tracing, far as looking at response codes, user ID, passwords, variables, but I also put a section in there that I might be looking for a particular piece of text. I'm basically making a straight API call and sending an event directly to BHOM. So instead of using the metrics or any standard processing within BHOM, I was bypassing that and sending events straight in. In this case, it would send an event of the script failed, where the log file was on the local host, and put that into an event. The attached zip files are, again, just to give you examples of how you can do this, again, within Playwright. I have used Selenium. There's a lot of similarities because ultimately they're both going to use Python code, but Selenium, when it records a Python script built into the BMC documentation, there are about 2 or 3 lines you need to add to the Selenium script to get it to run properly within the synthetic KM. All right. So I'm generating alerts. I've got things coming into Helix. Obviously, anybody who wants to go towards AIOps and you've started to build service models, how do synthetic transactions fit within service models? How can I now use synthetic transactions to give me an idea of how my environment is running? So quite simply, I can create an alarm policy that is looking for synthetic transaction scripts, and I'm going to show all this as well, so don't panic too much. I can then create a service model. Subtle hint, do not add the event to the higher level service model, because if it's a critical one, it's not going to make that service model change color. What I will normally do is create a secondary, whether it be a business service, technical service, whatever you want to call it, a secondary configuration item or service model connected to my primary business service. Then the impact will go through properly. And again, I'll show that. There is something, and again, anybody who knows me, I'll tell you what you need to know as it stands today, and there is a little bit of what we're going to change. So to make synthetic transactions impact a business service, I'm going to have to use events at the moment. The health indicators currently do not support synthetic transaction metrics. That is going to change in the future. I'm not going to say how long, but it's not going to be that far away that we can have health indicators from synthetic transactions. At the moment, to make it work, you need to generate an event. That event can obviously then be attached to a particular CI in my service model and do it that way. And I will show it all in a second. Oops. So let me go back to car. So I am now back in BHOM, AIOps, Helix, whatever you want to call it today. And I'm going to show you how I got my business service over here, which is my BMC, to change color. And if I look at, if I look at my business service, in this case called docs.bmc.com, there are no events against it. This could be any of your business services, doesn't matter. Underneath here, I have my BMC or my underscore BMC as a technical service. I think it's a BAI actually. Yes, it's a business application. that is using the event that was generated in BHOM using anomaly detection. I'll show it all in a little while. So yes, this is my event that came into BHOM, or my alarm event, an anomaly event that came into BHOM. I've attached it to this particular business service. So if I go and edit this service and I click into there, oops, no, I didn't mean to click that one. If I click into events, you'll see that this particular business application has an associated event rule. At some time, health indicators will support the KM, so we can look at the underlying metrics. But in this case, I have an event rule. And my default rule here is just looking for if host equals my underscore BMC, which is what I set in my monitoring policy for this particular synthetic transaction. What that eventually allows to happen is for this to propagate its severity to the higher level business service. As I said, do as I say, not as I do. Do not, and I can't stress this enough, do not attach that event to the higher level business service because you won't see impact. It needs to be at a lower level business service or business application, in my case, to impact the higher one. And if I go back to services, get there. If I go back to services and we look at docs.bmc.com, you can see it's impacted. You can see it's underlying. And yes, that was done earlier on today. And this is how long it's been out for. And if you look at service hierarchy, you can see the hierarchy that's going on. How did I make that happen? Simply using alarm policies built into operations management. So if I go and look at alarm policies, happen to have one here. My policy is literally looking at a synthetic transaction metric. Eventually. Come on. There you go. So I'm looking at the execution time. I could be looking at response codes. I could be picking any of the metrics that are coming out of synthetic transactions. I've done this specifically for this particular synthetic transaction. I could obviously do it for all instances. And yeah, in this case, I wanted to generate an alarm if the transaction was taking more than 1 millisecond for one polling cycle, and I'm going to generate a critical alarm. Just needed to make it work for the purposes of demoing. Obviously, you probably wouldn't be quite that, yeah, probably not so good to have every synthetic transaction in the environment with 1 millisecond timing for one poll. But anyway, that can be done. I could also do straight anomaly detection. If I enabled automated anomaly detection for all metrics, or I could configure the KPIs, enable anomaly detection for that. Or I could do multivariant when, let's say, I'm running a transaction in Chicago, and I'm just going to pick where I've lived in the world. I'm running synthetic transactions from Chicago. I'm running synthetic transactions from Orlando, and I'm running synthetic transactions for Bicester in England. I could create a multivariant policy looking at all those transactions and treating them as one kind of anomaly. So again, standard processing within BHOM to allow me to do that. One other thing that we really need to look at synthetic transactions, obviously all of this data that is running in synthetic transactions is creating metrics within BHOM. So if I went to devices, my underscore BMC, so we can look at the data and see what's actually happening with those transactions, see what's going on. Or, again, anybody else who's known me in previous life, what do I think one of the other than BHOM itself and AIOps and the rest of it, what is something that we've done in Helix which really makes everybody's life around the globe easier? I want to be able to display the data, the metrics, the events, the whatever, in a way that I don't need to be a Mike Yates geek to understand what's going on. And it's simply dashboards. So in my environment, I have the odd one or two dashboards. But in this case, I want to look at just purely synthetic transactions. So I've got synthetic transactions running in my environment. These are my synthetic transactions. These are the variable knowledge module application instance and parameters that are running in the environment. So I've picked everything. I've picked all the metrics that are being generated, and I'm displaying them in a single view. I can obviously set this dashboard to daily report, weekly report, monthly report. I can customize it in any way I want. I just wanted to very quickly show, yep, we can see all the data. In this case, you've got, the various high baselines, low baselines. That's for anomaly detection, for instance. We've got, come down here, we've got various, so in my BMC, I'm actually running different scripts because I'm looking at the docs URL and I'm actually running the synthetic transaction, because synthetic KM also just supports straight URL checking, very much like the web transaction KM that we have as well. And if I come down to like the Simplot one, this is actually using custom timers against the particular steps. No, I didn't name them very well, but you could put the custom timers in. So we've got log in, log out, etc. So the synthetic transactions, just to précis everything I've said. Synthetic transactions, God's gift to very quickly understanding how my applications are running. It is, I will say, it is pretty simple to set up, as I said, and I've done it a few times. Did it in 15 minutes with a customer, installed everything, including the agent out there. We recorded a couple of scripts, deployed it to the agent, and 15, 20 minutes, we'd already got metrics coming into BHOM. So it can be incredibly quick. If you are running something like Dynatrace or AppD or some of these, we're not going to replace those. Say that categorically. This is as it sounds. I'm going to run a synthetic transaction. I'm going to go to particular pages. One of the questions was about session IDs, etc. When you're running the script, you can actually pull some of that information in from whatever URL you've gone to and pass it to other parts of that script. Again, 1-800 phone Google or 1-800 Google, and you'll be able to find how to do that from Playwright. Also, if you hadn't guessed, I've done nearly all of my synthetic transactions using Playwright. Couple of reasons, as I said before, synchronous or asynchronous is supported. Playwright will actually give you the ability to run more multiple scripts in a much shorter fashion than Selenium with. So if I'm using Playwright scripts, I can actually run more scripts on a particular agent more often than Selenium will allow you to do. Don't ask me why. It's all to do with the back-end translation of the Python code. But yes, Playwright gives you more. So I would say, subtle hint, use Playwright if you haven't done it. If you've recorded a bunch of Selenium scripts, hey, we can use those, no problem. Then the ability to pull that very easily into operations management. I have the ability to then deploy that script to one or multiple machines in a single click. I don't need to copy files from machine to machine. I can extend I recorded it through Playwright Recorder or Selenium Recorder because it has a very similar recording capabilities. And then I can go and edit that script as much as I want to add any other cool features you want to put in there. Question you had about multiple URLs. Ultimately, you are just recording whatever you did in that script. Then I can go back, look at the script, and ingest my custom timers. So if you kind of didn't guess, I love synthetic transactions. I have done for years. I find operations, I find understanding business applications, etc. They can be incredibly useful. I don't have to have business services to use synthetic transactions. So if you're not fully down the AI path, but you just want to know if your application's working or not, it's going to generate an event. So you will still see events in BHARM. I can raise incidents against it. I can run automation or whatever we need to do. So don't think synthetic transactions have to be there for AIOps. They don't. They can be there just in raw event management and monitoring. But when you start equating it to AIOps and you start looking at situations and everything else, they can be a part of that and they can give you really good guidance that yesterday my synthetic transaction against www.f1, if you hadn't guessed, I'm a huge Formula One fan, from Chicago and from Orlando was taking 3 seconds. So I have anomaly detection going, yep, its baseline is about 3 seconds. Suddenly the script in Bicester in England is taking 10 seconds, or it's slowly creeping up. I'm going to generate an alarm that Bicester in England is not running as well as it could do, but Orlando and Chicago are fine. Guess what the problem is there straight away? It looks like it's a network problem. So again, gives me indications that I don't need to have my business services there. Be useful because I could then mix that with the network connection stuff or a CPU there or whatever. But even without that, I've got information. Right. Customers using Silk before now. Anything specific you keep in mind before migrating? Simple answer to, and sorry, your question is there, and I know Silk Performer really well. I know TMArt really well. Yeah, I've used synthetic transactions all over the place. In answer to your question, and I'm going to be extremely flippant about this answer, so you'll have to excuse me. It depends on the scripts. There are some things in Silk Performer that are deep in the weeds as far as depending how you've recorded your scripts, you might have TCP recordings, you might have other kind of recordings. There is no way of just taking Silk, I was going to say Silk test that's showing Silk Performer scripts and converting them straight away. I would look at each one of them and see what's actually happening. There are features, and again, I'm going to say this. Silk Performer, because you had your GUI, you had your Silk Performer application, you could do some incredibly sophisticated stuff with Silk Performer. 90% of people who ran Silk Performer didn't know about some of the things you could do with there. I would have to look at the scripts and decide how well you want to run them, what you're doing within those scripts. So it can be as simple if you're doing fairly simple Silk Performer scripts to convert the script and re-record it and do whatever you need to do. If it is using some of the additional features that you had in Silk Performer, I would have to look at what you're doing and make a decision of the best way we can do it. So, and I know that's not a, oh yes, you just click a button and it converts it. I wish that was there. It's not. It is all down to what you've actually done in Silk Performer. I will, and I hate to use this analogy. In the old days, before Helix ITSM, and it's still there, and I can't complain. The remedy mid-tier, in Silk Performer, we actually had a plugin specifically for the remedy mid-tier environment because of the way the back-end system worked for the mid-tier. We needed to update something within Silk Performer to allow it to actually understand the code that was coming back. Playwright, and I believe Selenium, doesn't have that capability. But within Helix, obviously now ITSM is available straight through HTTP information using, the smart environment. I can still record against my Helix ITSM open bracket remedy close bracket and get the recordings if I have to go back to the mid tier. And this is, I know it's an internal example, but it is something that is specifically done within Silk Performer. So yeah, I'd have to look at the scripts, but you're quite happy to 1-800 email Mike with a script, and I can have a look and see what you did. I still have Silk Performer sitting on my laptop, so I still have it there. I've gone through a lot. Honestly, God's gift to computing, God's gift to BHOM, because it is so simple to actually make this stuff work. There's not much I need. Everybody runs Java, everybody runs Python. Recording the scripts compared to what I used to do in Silk Performer, I absolutely love it. The editing of the script file or extending the script file to anything you want, I find extremely flexible with, again, Playwright. Did I have to Google a bunch of stuff to find out how to do it? Oh, yes. If you get the slides and you want to use Playwright, I've hopefully guided you to being able to do it even quicker. Anyway, on that note,
So before we go on to the next note, Sam, we do have Walid who's raising his hand. And so maybe we can unmute and just do a quick Q&A. So Walid, if you want to go off mute, you can ask your question.
Or not.
Yeah, I don't know if he's got a problem coming off mute, but I've definitely given him facility. Can you hear us?
Oh, there he
Walid?
goes.
Hello. You hear us? The only thing he may have done is join via the browser, which doesn't always activate their audio. So Walid, I don't know if you have a specific question. You might need to type it into the Q&A. I know sometimes people have a problem connecting. And I suspect
yeah, he was asking. Well, this was asking about session IDs. I will probably answer that outside of this. The short answer is yes. There's ways within the scripts that you can pull different session IDs and pass through because you can store them as variables. But there's a longer answer to that. So yes, I will answer most of that in the question answers when we send it out, Sam. But end of the day, yes, there are ways that you can pull session IDs, etc. And yes, I know those intimately, especially from Silk Performer days.
Okay, thank you. And Walid, if that's answered your question, if you can just type something in the chat to let us know, but we will get more detail out in the blog post that will come with the recording. Thanks, Mike. We'll just go through these final slides. So there's only a few references. I'm not really going to talk to every slide, but if you are just starting out your AIOps journey, there's loads of really good stuff that we've got available. There is also the webinar page that I run with all of the webinars that I've done with Yaron from the start point, which was, I think, March of last year. We've run them pretty much every month, so they will help you on your journey. If there is any other topics that you do want us to include, then feel free to reach out to us and fill in the survey and say you'd like us to cover this. Mike is a regular co-host with Yaron and I. He's always got good topics, as we've seen. You've used almost the hour, which is fantastic, Mike. I'm sure we can find you for another one. If you can just move to the next slide. And this should just come up with a few other references. Thank you. So as I was mentioning, these are available on the community page, but I've made it easy for everyone. You can get all of the access to the recordings, Q&A and slides. You can see they're hyperlinked. This will be sent out to you so you can click on those separately. I don't know if there was one more slide. We'll just double check.
Oh,
Yeah, Q&A. There you go. Perfect. And I can see Ahmed had put his hand up, so I'm just going to find you. I don't know if you've put your hand back down again, but I saw you raise your hand and you're a regular attendee of webinars. Can you hear us? I don't know if you had questions still.